hardcore mothers. Let's see. I thought he had this all ready for me to go, but he doesn't. Can't count on him for anything. I don't even know how to open this thing. Anyway, what would they do without us, right? What would they do without us? Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. What an honor and a joy and a privilege it is for me to be speaking to you this morning. And let me tell you, I have a special word from the Lord because, as Pastor Bob said, I had one thing prepared and I was all ready to go, and was like, nope, that's not what I have. So this is for, I don't want to just say somebody out there today, but for someone's, and this is special from the Lord. So I'm excited to deliver it this morning, and hopefully I deliver it the way the Lord wants you to hear it. And so for those of you who do not know me, my name is Annette, and Pastor Bob and I are the lead pastors here at Rock River Community Church. So going back to the very beginning of creation, by the time God made woman, he was in the sixth day of working overtime. And the conversation between an angel and God probably went something like this. I imagine it. An angel appeared to the Lord and said, "Why are you spending so much time on this one?" The Lord answered, "Have you seen my spec sheet on her? I mean, she's got to be completely washable, and with over 200 movable parts, all replaceable. She's got to be able to run on Diet Coke or Diet Mountain Dew, and have a lap that can hold over 4 children. She has to have a kiss that can cure anything, from a scraped knee to a broken heart, and she will do everything with 2 hands." The angel was astounded. Only 2 hands? No way. And that's just the standard model? That's too much work for one day. I think you should wait till tomorrow to finish. "Oh, but I won't," the Lord protested. "I am so close to finishing this creation that is so dear to my own heart. She already heals herself when she's sick, and she can work 18 hours a day." The angel moved closer and touched the woman. "But Lord, you've made her soft." "She is soft," the Lord agreed, "but I've also made her tough. You have no idea what she can endure and what she can accomplish." "Will she be able to think?" the angel asked. The Lord replied, "Not only will she be able to think, she will be able to reason and negotiate." The angel then noticed something, and reaching out, he touched the woman's face. "Oh, it looks like you have a leak in this one. I told you were trying to put too much into this." "That's not a leak," the Lord replied. "That's a tear." "A tear? What's a tear for?" the angel asked. The Lord said, "The tear is her way of expressing her joy and her sorrow, her pain, her grief, her loneliness, and her pride." Wow, the angel was impressed. "You are a genius, Lord. You thought of everything. Woman is truly amazing." And the Lord replied, "However, if there is one flaw in woman, it is that she forgets what she's worth." So women, let's not forget what we're worth. This morning, if I had to title my message, and it is amazing really how the Lord works. And we shouldn't be amazed, but we do. He continues to amaze us. But every song we sang goes along with my message. And if I would have to title it today, and I know it's Mother's Day, but it would be titled "The Love of the Father." And some of my text this morning is taken from a book called "Having a Mary Heart in a Martha World" by Joanna Weaver. And I don't know, maybe some of you have read it, maybe some of you have never heard of it. But perhaps no passage of Scripture better describes the conflict that we feel as women. than the one that we find in the Gospel of Luke. Just mention the names Mary and Martha around a group of Christian women, and you'll get knowing looks and maybe some nervous giggles. We've all felt the struggle, right? The struggle, it's real. We want to worship with the heart of Mary. But the Martha inside, she just keeps bossing us around. So let's turn to the story in Luke 10, starting in verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. Oh, but Martha, she was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and she asked, "Lord, don't you care? Don't you care that my sister has left me to do all this work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered. Can you just hear him? "You are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her." I can just picture Martha scurrying around the house, right, in preparation for this banquet that she was going to have for the Messiah, for Jesus. He was in her house. So many things to do in so little time. These sisters, they remind me of my sister and I. My sister's definitely Martha. Definitely Martha. I can be Mary, but that is not my normal tendency. But my sister, let me tell you, she is amazing. She's always baking and cooking and sewing and painting. She's so talented. And let me tell you, she doesn't just make cupcakes. Oh, no. No. They have to be filled with cream cheese, filling. And then she proceeds to decorate them, and they look like this masterpiece. She can make them look like these flowers, actually. It's so amazing. Every little detail is carefully planned out. And me? No, I'm more like Mary. I will slap something together and call her good. Don't get me wrong, I like things a certain way, and I like them to look good and clean and neat and tidy. But I just don't spend time on those details. And I believe that God has made each one of us to be a Mary and a Martha. But some of us are bent one way or the other, and neither is right or wrong. See, Mary would be more apt to, I just picture her like meandering through, life and pausing maybe to smell the roses. Oh, but not Martha. Martha's more likely to be picking those roses, cutting the stems at an angle, putting them in a vase. Oh, but not stopping there, because that's what Mary would do. Martha would be adding baby's breath and, greenery to it, arranging it so you have this beautiful arrangement. And I believe that God has made each one of us different. And it's just like God, isn't it? He's just so amazing. He gives us all different gifts and personalities and strengths and weaknesses. And Martha is just such a control freak. I mean, she's even telling Jesus what to do. Look in verse 40. She actually interrupts Jesus. "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work all by myself? Tell her to help me." Lord, don't you care? Don't you care? I think she was also asking, Lord, do you see me? Do you care about me? Do you see I've been left alone to do all this work? Lord, do you love me? I think if we have to be honest this morning, I think we've all felt like that from one time or another. We find ourselves questioning God. Do you love me? Lord, do you see me? Do you even care about me? I'm down here all by myself. I see the love of God revealed in the story of Mary and Martha. But there's another story of two siblings in the Bible, and it's a few chapters later, and it's in Luke 15. And I believe this story is a greater picture of the love of the Father. This story is very familiar to each of us. It's the story of the prodigal son. So we're going to start in verse 11. So chapter 15, verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided the property up between them. And looking closer at this, there's something that this young man, there's something about him. He obviously, he must not have trusted his father, right? He really believed that perhaps his father didn't have his best interests in mind, that he wanted to have control of his own property and his own destiny and his own wealth. He wanted to do life his own way. In essence, this is what I think he was saying. Dad, I wish you were dead, because I want to do it my own way. Well, it's interesting that the father lets him do it. Have you noticed that God always allows us to walk away from his love? He will let us do things our own way because he's given us that free will. So continuing in verse 13, the Bible tells us that not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for that far distant country. That's such a powerful picture to me. Leaving home, doing our own thing, right, in our far off country. And for a while it's a lot of fun. I mean, he had money, right? And with money came friends, and with friends came parties, and with parties, well, you get it. I mean, he was living the dream. The Bible says that he squandered the wealth, and then a famine hit. Have you ever noticed how famine always follows rebellion? It may take a while, but eventually you are going to find that you have squandered the most precious thing, and you are left with only famine. The Bible goes on to say that he actually hired himself out. Let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, here he left his father's house, right? He wanted to be out from under the control of his father. And now he finds himself the slave of a stranger. See, you're going to serve somebody. I don't care how far you've run or how much you think you can do it on your own. You will end up enslaved to something or someone. And then this young man, he found himself feeding the pigs. Now, there's some of us in this room that can identify with that. But when you become a slave to the world, you will always be in want. He was so desperate. Well, let's see what verse 16 says. It says that he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. But nobody gave him anything. And then in verse 17 it says, and I love this part. When he came to his senses. Anyone ever come to your senses? Have you lived in that far off country and it's been maybe not as wonderful as you thought it was going to be? And then all of a sudden, you have that aha moment. And you come to your senses. Well, after the son came to his senses, it goes on to say that he was said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am. I'm starving to death. In other words, being a slave to God is a whole lot better than being a slave to anything or anyone else. Being a slave to your father, he will always provide for you. being a slave to this world, you will always be in want. So the young man decided that he would go back. But he knew that he wasn't worth anything to be called. Thank you. He could hear me. Yeah, I got to take advantage of it. Doesn't happen very often. Oops, did I really say that? So anyway, he decided to go back. But he knew that he wasn't even worthy to no longer be called his father's son, right? He wasn't going to ask to be restored. He wasn't even asked to be part of the family. He thought, if I could just be a servant to my father, I would have a roof over my head and I would have food to eat. So that's kind of the story of the youngest son. Now the real story, I think, is in the father. The love of the father. In the culture back then, if you had talked to your father that way, or treated him in that manner, you would have been disowned from the family. It would have been the highest insult that you could have done. And yet, this father was different. This father was unlike any other father in that culture. Maybe that this world has ever known. I want you to see this because it's so powerful. In verse 20, it says, "But while the young man was still a long way off, his father saw him." His father saw him. And do you know what that tells me? That tells me that his father was watching for him. His father was waiting for him to come home. While he was a long way off, his father saw him. I have to wonder if it became part of his daily routine, like throughout the day. Was the father like looking for his son? He must have been. He must have been, because he was waiting for him to come home. Now that in and of itself would be amazing. But that's not where the story ends. This next part is what blows my mind. The father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. Filled with compassion. Not contempt, not anger, not bitterness, but compassion. That he ran to meet him. Not only did he see him far off, but he ran. He ran to meet him. No matter where you are this morning, no matter if you are in this far off country or if you're just a little distant, today is your aha moment. It's time. It's time to come to your senses. God is waiting to meet you right where you're at. And then finally, he got to his son. When he got to his son, he didn't say, "Well, it's about time you come home. Where have you been? I suppose you spent all the money. What an embarrassment you are to the family." There's a million things the father could have said, right? And we've probably all said those things, if we're honest. But that's not what this father does. Oh no. He wraps himself around him, his arms around him, and he kisses him. What a beautiful picture. The young man falls to his knees and he tries to repent. I'm sure he may have rehearsed the story all the way home. What am I going to say? What am I going to say, right? We've done that, right? Maybe I'm not worthy to be your son. And he has this whole big speech prepared. And as he starts saying, "I'm not worthy to be your son," the father interrupts him and he says in verse 22, "But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring me the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, and now he's alive. He was lost, and now he's found.' So they began to celebrate." Wow. Are you seeing the connection here this morning? This is an analogy of the love that our Heavenly Father has for you. Our Heavenly Father, He not only runs to us, but He sees us. He sees you. He wants to restore you. I want you to see this because this is so important. See, when the Father called for, He just didn't call for a robe. He called for the best robe. And when He did that, He restored distinction, honor, and identity upon the Son. All the Son had hoped for was to be a servant, to be a slave, one of His Father's hired hands, but instead, He was fully restored. When the Father says, put a ring on His finger, what He's actually doing is He's restoring His authority. A ring gives authority. And when the sandals in that culture were a sign of sonship, because slaves didn't wear sandals. So when He put the sandals back on His Son's feet, He was restoring him as His son. He was welcoming him back as part of the family. And then finally, a feast. A feast was given in His honor. See, these things, they're very, very significant. And many times I've just read right past them, right? Never thought about it until this week. The robe is distinction, identity, and honor. The ring is our authority. And the sandals mean sonship. We're part of the family. And that is the good news of the gospel. We receive from the Father what we do not deserve. And when we finally come to our senses and come back to Him, what does He do? He welcomes us. He welcomes us. He receives us. But so often, we miss out because we have a wrong attitude. And this is the attitude of the oldest son. So we're getting to that oldest son. So verse 23 tells us, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. And I'm reading that, and it just hit me. The older son was busy working in the field. Who does that remind us of? Martha, right? Martha was busy. Martha was also the older sister. Something about older siblings. Anyway, we can get so busy working for God that we never really get around to knowing. We never get around to knowing God. We're so busy that we never partake in the riches that are ours as children of the King. Verse 28, continuing on, it says, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So that was the feast, the banquet that they were having. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I've never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. Can you just hear him? But when this son of yours has squandered all your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him? There's that attitude. But that older brother, he was so angry, right? He was so angry that he started to list off everything that the younger son has done. Don't we do that? We always like to point out what everybody else has done. He said, he dishonored your name. He squandered your wealth. He's an embarrassment. He was wild living. What an embarrassment to our family he's been. Why on earth are you throwing him a party? And this is kind of funny too. He seemed especially upset about that fattened calf. He was really upset about that. The key to the problem that the older son had is found in verse 29, I believe. But he answered his father, look, I have been slaving for you, and I have never disappointed your orders. we can be such good Christians, can't we? Slaving away, working so hard that we never get around to knowing the Father's love. Much like Martha, she was so busy preparing and getting everything ready, every detail, that she did not take time to sit at the feet of Jesus like Mary and to know the love of the Father. So in closing this morning, I'm going to leave you with 3 key truths from these stories. The first thing is proximity. Proximity does not necessarily ensure relationship. The young man had been living in his father's house, right? The older brother, actually. But he did not know the heart of his father, the compassion that his father had. And Jesus was in the house with Mary, right? They were in close proximity. Martha. But Martha did not take the time to get to know the Father's love. They were both in close proximity, and yet they missed out. And the second thing is that God's love for others does not diminish his love for you. Have you ever gotten upset when you see God bless other people and they get this blessing that you've always wanted or something that you've longed for? And maybe you're a little irritated. And yet, when that happens, that does not diminish his love for you just because you didn't receive it at that moment. But what do? What do? Oh, we get jealous, right? And we let envy grow inside of us. And I believe we do that because we don't really know who we are or who we belong to. And we have forgotten our worth. So this morning, number 3, whether you are a prodigal son or an older brother or a Mary or a Martha, we all need to come to our senses. We all need to have that aha moment. It's time to come home. It's time to come home this morning. Whether you're living in that far-off country, or maybe you've just been a little distant, come home. The Father is waiting for you. Whether you've been wandering in rebellion, or just working so hard that you forgot to sit at the feet of Jesus and understand his love for you, it's time to come home. I picture each one of us this morning coming back to the Father, coming back to our senses, saying, Lord, I've missed out, and I want to come home. And I see him clothing us with robes of righteousness and grace, so undeserved, but he willingly gives. And he's restoring our identity as his child. Then he puts a ring on our finger, right? And he says, you don't have to be intimidated anymore. I want you to walk in boldness and authority. You are my beloved. Doesn't stop there, because then he puts new sandals on our feet, our weary, torn feet, because we've been working and slaving so hard. And that reminds us that we are his child, that restores our identity, and we belong to him. And then he's throwing us a feast, right? He's throwing us a party. He's celebrating because we've come home. But here's the truth. God wants to throw a party for you because you are worth it. You are worth the fattened calf. You are worth it. He's not looking for what you can do. He's not looking for what you have done. He's just wanting to receive you back this morning. He wants to restore to you everything that you have lost. Come home. Come home. Your Heavenly Father is waiting to say those words that everything I have is yours. And everything you need, I have, and it's yours. Ladies, God wants you to know your worth today. Maybe the world, the enemy has stolen your identity. God is running to you. He wants to restore your identity this morning as a daughter of the King. And men, I'm not forgetting about you today. God wants to restore your authority. He wants to put that ring on your finger and new sandals on your feet, because you are his son and you belong to him. Welcome home.